Welcome everyone to the first Dean's Forum of the new year. I plan to hold a series of these during the year on what I hope will be interesting topics. And we'll also record these and post them on the college website for folks who aren't able to join us live. So hopefully it'll be of interest to both students, faculty, and our alumni. The last 6 months have really turned a lot of our lives upside down. I don't think any of us, well, Bill Gates imagined this in 2015, but I certainly had no idea of anything like this being possible. I think our response as a faculty and students has been remarkable, but I thought it was kind of a time to step back and maybe take a look at where we've been over a pretty grueling 6 months. Think about how this has impacted our schools and our various disciplines. So I've asked each of our school chairs to talk a little bit about both the short-term impacts on teaching and learning, but also what this pandemic may mean. A lot of us don't think we're going to go right back to normal as we were before the pandemic. So we'll go with each of the school chairs. If you would we've got a fairly tight time frame, so if you would hold your questions to the end, and you can put them in the chat, and we'll look those up. So first, Scott Marble, Chair of the School of Architecture. Scott?
Okay, thanks, Steve, and thanks for doing this. It's really great just to get together with all the chairs and actually just quickly talk about what we're all doing and thinking. So we only have 10 minutes. I wanted to kind of position my thoughts on this in the form of kind of reflecting on what has happened, but also I'm kind of in that mindset now of thinking about what we're going to be doing moving forward and what opportunities have come out of this. I think, for everybody, one of the biggest impacts of this has just been how we work and where we work. And one of the things that I've been emphasizing with the School of Architecture is that the current state of remote learning that we're all in is really preparing students for the future. In other words, we think of this as kind of a necessity, and what occurred in the spring as a necessity that we just had to instantly go online. I think it really has become a type of education itself. And I think that job opportunities will actually increase for people who know how to use this kind of technology, who can collaborate online and in person, and who can thrive, in multiple working environments. So I think the fact that we have started working this way is actually kind of a supplemental type of education. And I would encourage students to, not miss this opportunity in your classes to kind of explore creative ways to utilize the technology as part of your kind of course challenge. I mean, don't look at it as something that's in the way. Look at it as something where, something that you can be creative with. So I think that's one thought that I had. Where we're working, is a huge issue for everybody. We're all working in dispersed areas in different places. The contexts are very different. And I think that this is something that will also have kind of lasting impact. In architecture, I think firms transition to remote working fairly easily. A lot of firms were set up with the infrastructure already. And honestly, I think that we did a really good job of transitioning. I think we should stop and actually acknowledge that the transition that we went through in the spring to remote teaching really went exceptionally well. And I think we should stop and acknowledge that. And I think aspects of this kind of distributed and hybrid working model will remain in some reformed model of hybrid delivery of education and in how we practice in our firms in the future. One of the things that I think has already come to fruition for us, and I've noticed it in the kind of professional world, is that that schools and offices are able to draw upon a much larger pool to actually hire from. As an example, in the School of Architecture, we had to do a very last-minute hire in a very specialized area of our curriculum, and we were able to hire somebody who's incredibly well-versed in the topic, Ermac Turin. It was an environmental systems class, who happens to be in Boston. So, that we were able to overcome the limitations of what we might be able to find in the local area by expanding our pool of candidates to a larger geographic area. Firms are doing the same thing. So I think, this idea of a kind of a distributed working environment is going to have positive opportunities in the future. I think we've all been impacted by enrollment and recruiting to an extent, but it's also worth again taking note that I think we were all a little bit surprised about this, but that enrollment remained pretty steady for the fall, and I think that might have surprised some people, but we need to kind of think about what that means. A lot of the declines in enrollment had to do with visas and things that were kind of indirectly related to COVID. But I think this is something also that is interesting. In 2008 and 2009, enrollments in schools went way down. Certainly in architecture. I'm speaking for architecture now. I'm not sure that's going to happen this time. I think we would have started to see some hint of it this semester if it was going to happen. And I think it actually might have a reverse effect. A lot of times when job opportunities get less, people want to go back to school. And I think there's a good chance that might happen in this go-around. And it gives us the opportunity to target kind of early and mid-career candidates who are looking to supplement their knowledge and their expertise and skills by coming back to school. So I was trying to think also about what are the new design issues in architecture that are going to come up, and what's going to impact that, and that list got really large. But there's obviously kind of technical issues in the built environment that are already kind of been foregrounded by this, just having to do with air quality, just and things like that. So there are definitely going to be some significant impacts, I would say, on the profession and by extension how we teach as an outcome of this. I think one of the things that I've been noticing is that the general public now has a much more acute sense of spatial awareness. I think everybody's going to know how to measure 6 feet after this is all over. And that's just one of many things. I mean, when I see people walking around buildings and in the city, you just see that people are much more aware of their surroundings. And I feel like that's an opportunity for us. In some ways, it's kind of the public is educating themselves on the significance of the built environment in a way that will benefit professions that address that. Some people are already starting to ask, what are going to be the implications of the physical distancing guidelines that might start to come out of this? Are buildings going to get 4 times as large to accommodate the same number of people? I don't think that's going to happen, but it's likely that there will be some kind of different guidelines and different norms that start to happen. I've been thinking a lot lately about the workplace, office space, the open office. What's going to happen to the open office? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that, but I think a lot of these issues and a lot of these kind of prototypes and trends are going to be questions. What's going to happen to the density of cities? This is another thing that's being looked at right now. There's a lot of anecdotal indicators where people are kind of moving out of cities or getting second homes or just leaving cities right now. Whether that'll last, it's hard to know. Another just kind of interesting anecdote is one of the real challenges in urban cities with skyscrapers, workplaces and skyscrapers, is the elevator. the bottleneck to even get in the building is just the elevator, which has led to staggered start times, which still hasn't really solved the problem. So, issues like that are gonna come up. I only have a minute and a half. So I started also thinking about where the opportunities lie in the School of Architecture, both in the curriculum and around research. And I think that when a crisis like this happens, there's always opportunities for any discipline to take advantage of what's going to come out of it, whether it's direct or indirect. It's a time when radical change can actually happen. Building performance, as I kind of alluded to a minute ago, building performance will likely be redefined and certainly very carefully reconsidered, especially around air quality and healthy environments. And that is kind of fertile ground for our high performance building group. There's enormous opportunities there. The last recession, interestingly, in 2008 and 2009, saw a pretty significant transformation in architecture, where we went from CAD to BIM. That literally happened at about that time. I think it partly had to do with the downtime that allowed firms to kind of retool their offices, but it was a significant shift that happened during that downtime. So the question comes up now is if this crisis will allow what is really kind of a long overdue next step in this transition from kind of BIM to big data. And the Digital Building Lab obviously was a pioneer in BIM and is primed to take this topic on. And then of course, healthcare and healthcare facilities is the subject of Cimtegrate, and they've already been doing work around this for years. And they've already started, producing work related to COVID. So again, I think there are opportunities that come out of this that really we need to take advantage of. So my kind of takeaway is just like the kind of triage period is over, and now we're in a period, I think, of looking for takeaways, looking for ways to have significant impact on our disciplines and on the way we teach and learn. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Scott. Next, Daniel Castro, Chair of the School of Building Construction.
Thank you, Steve, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to participate in this forum. So my presentation is going to be, first, I'm going to talk about the programs that we have in the School of Building Construction, so everybody's aware. That's the context I'm going to be focusing my discussion. Then I'm going to look at the data, right? The numbers, not from enrollment, but the numbers from the industry. How is the industry doing? I'm talking about construction industry. Then going to the ground and seeing what are construction firms or related doing to address the pandemic. And I will finish the presentation with things we are doing at the school, and how is this affecting the school. So let me start by saying that we have 6 programs in the school, actually 5 degrees, the Bachelor of Science in Building Construction, the Master of Science in Building Construction and Facility Management, the Master in Real Estate Development, the Professional Masters in Occupational Safety and Health, PhD in Building Construction, plus an undergraduate certificate in Construction Management. So let's start by looking at the numbers from the industry. So basically, I got the latest report from the Associated General Contractors of America from August 20th to look at what really are the trends in construction activity. So I look at 3 private measures of recent and expected construction activity. Dodge Data and Analytics, Construct Connect, and Architecture Billings Index, ABI. And I will explain to you why I chose those, but really all of them imply a drop in non-residential projects. And however, when we look at indicators, like for example the census, there is an increase in housing starts as permits are soaring. So when you hear contractors or people in the street, they say, "Oh, construction hasn't stopped. We haven't stopped in Texas. We keep building." Really, we need to look closer into those statements because the data doesn't really reflect that exactly. When we look at Dodge Analytics, for example, total construction starts in dollars fell 7% from June to July. Non-building segment fell 31%. However, I have to see also that non-residential building starts rose 3% and residential building starts increased 2%. So basically the consensus is that the gain in non-residential building starts was entirely due to strength in the Northeast and West markets or regions. But really when we look at South Central, South Atlantic regions, they were down sharply. Okay. Now, when we look at another interesting indicator, which is the ABI, that my colleagues in architecture know very well, the Architectural Billing Index, is a leading indicator that, and the reason we use it in construction because it leads construction activity by 9 to 12 months. Right now, the reading from June to July was 40, and any score below 50 means that firms with decreased billings outnumbers the firms with increased billings. So that shows a decrease in activity in design firms, and then we're going to see down the road the same effect in construction. Now, the census and housing and urban development tells a different story in terms of housing starts and units, because they soared 23% from June to July, and also year to year. From past summer to this summer, is at a 23% increase. Multifamily starts, an increase of 57%, and single family starts roughly 8% from June to July, and 7% year to year. And I look for an explanation of this, and there's one interesting one from Wells Fargo in economics that says that because people are moving away from density populated, high cost metro areas, like for example San Francisco, New York, LA, to other more affordable areas such as Phoenix, Salt Lake, Austin, hopefully Atlanta, then that's what we are seeing, these increases, right? Interestingly, tomorrow there will be a result from a survey available from AGC, Associated General Contractors, an Autodesk survey that documents the impact of the pandemic on construction activity and employment. So the good news is going to be tomorrow. So I cannot comment on that, but tomorrow will be available. But there is one available. It's the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics. They posted the geographic impact of COVID-19 by industry. So you can go there and see what is the impact on your own industry. I was able to look at the construction, and it's very interesting. Okay, the next segment of my presentation is going to be going to the ground and seeing what is going on. What are construction companies doing really to cope with this situation? So definitely, as my colleague Scott said, they're adopting technology. Collaboration technology, so just this is one example of what we are doing right now, or Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, Microsoft 365, just to funnel everything as a remote working environment. Specifically to manage design construction processes, they're using Bluebeam a lot, which is a tool used for collaboration in design and construction, and really, the consensus I'm hearing is the collaboration channels have been very effective in that sense, as Scott said. Now, another issue that is critical is the relationship with the clients, and they're also acknowledging that the collaboration is working well. Now, among the benefits, improving work-life balance. Something very critical is training. Remote training is something they were not used to, but that's the new norm. And it's very important. And let me tell you an example of what they are doing to really address this. They're using the buddy system. So they're partnering, or assigning a buddy to a new employee, so that person feels connected to the firm. Why? Because new employees can become disenfranchised quickly if they don't do something like that. So that's an important issue there. Now, another positive is reduction in office space and overhead costs. The industry acknowledged that as a positive, but also challenges. People are anxious now. They want to come back to the office, especially new employees. For example, the new employees are getting a laptop in the mail with a card that says "Welcome to Skanska." Again, they don't feel that connection yet. So it's important that they see their peers. But again, another challenge is cybersecurity, remote connectivity. And trust, trust is developed more effectively working face to face. It's an important aspect. Now, in terms of construction sites, really companies are using more mobile apps for inspections. That's something that used to be done in the past, sparingly, but now is the norm. Virtual meetings between teams, especially overseas. That's also client engagement. now clients are expecting to have this collaboration. Collaboration has become more intense between companies and clients. And even these firms, construction firms, became suddenly competing with educational institutions, because now they are doing more webinars. They are educating their employees and educating the public. So they are even offering PDH, professional development hours. And that's something new in the industry. And strategies the industry are doing is reduce unnecessary overhead, basically also continue recruitment. They have to continue recruitment and aggressive with the technology. I mean, technology is a must for them now. I think that they acknowledge that the productivity has been high since the beginning of the pandemic. Now, what is coming up in the future? As I said, training is going to be important, especially to attract young employees who want to be engaged with the company. In terms of funding, I think they expect something related to a stimulus that is going to come. They need to compete for that. Is similar to what happened in 2007, 2008. All right. Now, let me bring also some comments from the real estate development, the facility management that is not central to construction, but it has a lot of connection there. And there will be an op-ed soon from Professor Porter and Professor Yang on this topic. So I don't want to spoil that, but I just want to take a few notes on that. They will be discussing whether the space and the facility is essential, or what should be done with shared workspaces when employees return. Also, the issue of bioresilience in facilities. I think Scott mentioned that for high performance building, and the building operational continuity. In terms of PMOSH, which is occupational safety and health, I think the fact that we have this program has also opened new opportunities for the school, because, for example, a group as part of the capstone master's project, they work on a topic titled "Responding to a Pandemic from a Health and Safety Professional Perspective," and suddenly this became very important. Why? Because this 95-page report, that was assisted, by the way, by a corporate sponsor and an instructional associate that is also from the industry, provided tools to assist organizations. And for example, they focus on 5 key response aspects that can be applied across multiple organizations in terms of leadership, essential workers, remote workers, return to work, and future pandemic planning and preparation. So this gives us this opportunity. Now, my last minute, if you allow me, will be to discuss what are we doing in the school. And so the issue in the school is, of course, we are all remote, but what we are doing is using the possibility of having site visits, using virtual tours, making sure that our students are exposed to that. We are not losing that. Again, we made the decision 5 years ago to be a school with more hands-on technology. And I think our students are expecting that, our faculty are expecting that. But again, it also poses challenges because, we cannot simply demo a laser scanner in the classroom and then we have to share it. Then we have to clean it and stuff like that. But I think our students and faculty are well versed with the possibility of using technology for demos. And I think using collaboration tools such as Bluebeam, such as Navisworks, the virtual lab that the college offers is essential right now. Our students have access to this software. So I think, moderator, I think I am done, right?
All right. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Shubro Guhatakirta is the chair of the School of City and Regional Planning. Shubro.
All right. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the last 2 presentations. I learned a lot. So thank you, Scott and Daniel. And in my 10 minutes, I'm just going to, first of all, reflect upon our discipline. What is going on with the discipline, the larger body of literature, and then speak about how our school is taking advantage some of the changes that are happening in terms of how we are thinking about planning in terms of the external and internal disruptors that are already happening. I had a short presentation, but I'm not going to worry about showing you all the graphics that I had. But just to go back to what's happening in cities, let's think about cities in terms of its 6,000 years of history. And over the 6,000 years of histories, we have had pandemics almost all throughout its history. Throughout the 6,000 years, we have had pandemics. And so this wasn't a black swan event. That is, we knew that such a pandemic would be coming. We had a similar pandemic in 1918, 1919, where anywhere between 50 and 100 million people died. Now the latest numbers are 845,000 deaths across the world and 25 million cases. So, and we are still in the middle of it. So we have to first of all understand that in the evolution of cities, pandemics had played a big role in terms of how cities were planned and redesigned over time. So cities, as you can imagine, are some sort of complex systems. And when I say cities are complex systems, I'm not talking about some engineer or some systems designer who is telling us that it's a complex system. We learned about cities as being complex systems from The Life and Death of Great American Cities, which was written by Jane Jacobs. So Jane Jacobs told us that it's a complex system. And it's a complex system that's also highly innovative. It brings together a lot of talent, a lot of diversity. And given all the talent and diversity in cities, it's also our biggest economic engine. 80% of the GDP around the world is generated in the cities. So these are complex systems which are highly, highly economically vibrant. But as they evolve, they have some internal disruptors. And these internal disruptors are growing levels of social inequities. And we have seen that throughout time. As cities develop, there has been growing levels of social inequities, and there has been a lot written about the demise of the Roman Empire, which was due to the internal tensions of inequities, and also growing levels of environmental damage. So these are some of the internal disruptors that happen when cities evolve. But we also have external disruptors, and these external disruptors are, of course, natural disasters, wars, and then we have pandemics. So when we look at these two disruptors, we also know, and there's been a lot written about how the internal disruptors, that is your levels of social inequities, and how we are dealing with our environmental issues, lead to how we actually cope and adapt to our external disruptors. So if we had plans in place that took care of our social inequities and was able to deal with environmental issues, we would be better able to cope with external disruptors like pandemics. And that is where city planning actually sits. It sits in this gap between the system, the complex system, and these disruptors that we expect, both the internal disruptors, which happens as cities evolve, and the external disruptors. Now, the question is, how does COVID-19 transform urban regions? And to think about the short-term versus the long-term effects, what we have to avoid is confirmation bias. And what I mean by confirmation bias is that we see headlines as New Yorkers are fleeing the suburbs because the demand is insane in the suburbs. You see reports of increases in San Francisco real estate listings because people are moving out of San Francisco. You also see reports about drops in global carbon emissions, almost 25% drops in global carbon emissions. But these are what I call confirmation bias. These are things happening which we don't see them as continuing to last for medium to long term. And the reasons are quite well explained in our theory. You know, our economic theory says that agglomeration effects matter. Agglomeration of people and activities and diversity in one place, in central places, is an important driver of cities. And the second aspect of cities is that city has also been conceived of as an urban theater. That is, people want to actually be in this social drama, to be seen in the social spaces. And Lewis Mumford, Richard Sennett, Walter Benjamin, there have been a lot of urban theorists that have said that the cities actually create this drama, this theater, and you cannot recreate it in places like in the suburbs. So cities are essential. But you can look at certain trends that are going to be lasting. And how do we identify those trends? One way to identify those trends is to look at what has been happening before the pandemic. Okay, so look at trends that were happening before the pandemic and see if the pandemic has accelerated or magnified those trends. And I'm going to talk about a few of those trends now. One, of course, is remote work. That was happening well before the pandemic. If you look at American Time Use Survey, it's quite clear that remote work was already happening. And now we know for some professions, it will probably be lasting. And we are now doing some research on if households choose to do remote work, do they make different choices of where to live? That is, would they then choose to live in the suburbs? And our most preliminary results suggest that no, actually households choose where to live because of many other reasons, not just because of commute distances. The second trend that was happening before the pandemic and has increased or magnified is online shopping and home delivery. We already know about that. And therefore, we need to figure out how to repurpose commercial spaces and retail spaces. And that's going to be a significant challenge. You know, what do you do with these vacant spaces? The third trend that was happening before the pandemic was disruption in our public transportation systems. So micromobility has become a big part of our transportation systems. You see these scooters everywhere. You have Uber and Lyft. So those are major disruptors, and these disruptors in some ways will continue. And then, of course, there's a huge demand for biking and walking infrastructure. That is, people want the infrastructure to help them to be active mobility. And I heard from one of the Ohio Department of Transportation engineers that bikes are now the new toilet paper because it's very hard to find bikes. Fourth, expansion of the gig economy. So the gig economy is now going to expand people who are delivering your packets, people who are bringing your food. There are different types of gig economies people are thinking up all the time, cooking food. So that's going to also expand. And when you have an expansion of the gig economy, we have to think very carefully about what are the social and economic vulnerabilities that come with the gig economy. Because these people are vulnerable because they may not have health insurance, they may not be able to claim unemployment. So how do we design our support systems so that these vulnerabilities can be addressed? And finally, the growing inequities. And we have been seeing that before the pandemic. We have racial, ethnic, class, and these growing inequities have been laid bare during the pandemic. We know that minorities, the underrepresented minorities have been more severely affected by the pandemic. So we have to address the issue of inequities more aggressively. So the most consequential event that happened during the past few months is this worldwide social movement, which was triggered by the police killings of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, and that highlights racial biases in our criminal justice system. So we are now witnessing this social consciousness, this kind of a self-reflection, which is leading to a revolution to end racial injustices and white supremacy. So there is this unfinished project of the 1960s. Remember the 1960s, we had similar kinds of social upheavals, and which led to a flurry of legislation, the civil rights movements, several other, the Title IX movements, There are many fair housing acts. Those all came across during that period. So now we have to finish that project. So we need to figure out a way by which we can create these systems which are blind to race and class. So finally, let's just end with what is SCARF's response. So we are going to reevaluate our entire curriculum and see how we can make equity and justice an underlying cross-cutting theme across all our courses, or almost all our courses. So that's already underway. We are offering a short 1-credit course each year on equity, justice, and place. We are going to introduce the history of pandemics into urban and regional theory. The history of pandemics was not necessarily a very big part of our urban and regional theory discussion, because, we had pandemics 100 years ago. It almost got, it was left out of our syllabus. So we are going to talk about that. In our research efforts, we are already very much into the research around the pandemics. We know Cleo Andrus has developed this county level calculator of risk. Depending on how many people are congregating, you can actually calculate risks. Elora Raymond is tracking evictions, which may be triggered by the economic disruptions related to COVID-19. And we are also looking at long-term impacts of remote work, its effects on transportation and transit systems, and energy demands. And these are a series of research projects going on in CSPAV and CQGRD. So with that, I'm going to stop and see if you have questions, I can address those.
Well, we'll hold the questions till the end. Thank you, Shubro. Jim Budd, Chair of the School of Industrial Design.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate the opportunity, and obviously this is going to be an ongoing issue for everyone involved. So what I've tried to do is just sort of look at what we've done in the school, how we've had to rethink our curriculum, and then both short-term and long-term impacts. And I've done a bit of a survey of what's going on in the field, and there are dozens of articles available online that really address some of these issues, and I've tried to encapsulate some of those. So obviously the change in the pandemic has had serious impact on the hands-on nature of our studio-based education. And we've had to make several changes. So the kinds of issues that we've sort of faced are the lack of the ability to surround ourselves with inspirational materials and the ability to share current work at the desktop with our colleagues, both students and instructors, and also the ability to access workshops and specialized equipment. So that's been a big hit for us, where students are used to getting access to the workshop to produce models. And then access to our labs. We've got a number of labs now, a growing number of labs, so access to special facilities there. And also the ability to present and substantiate design decisions in person are really key elements of the way our curriculum was originally built. So we've had to rethink the studio model. And fortunately, we've already integrated the use of digital tools into our curriculum from the entry level up. And this has significantly helped us to facilitate the transition to remote learning for both the spring and the summer semesters. However, it's obvious that there are key elements missing. So particularly the ability to share rough concepts and sketches and models, and to easily collaborate. This is a particularly difficult scenario for the first year students who have either not had any studio exposure or limited studio exposure. So it's been a big deal about how do you ramp that up and how do you manage that process. So we will either have to rethink how we can use existing tools to support remote instruction and collaboration, or we'll have to look at developing new tools for that. And there's lots of things beginning to happen and to shape and reshape what's going on. So in terms of what we've been doing so far, So we've been able to shift a lot of our studio work from physical models to digital models. And they're both pros and cons to this change. So we lose the benefit of iterative model making, and we lose the touch and feel of physical models, and we lose some sense of proportion. At the same time, we gain higher levels of understanding and facility with digital tools that can strengthen students' portfolios and open opportunities for entry-level jobs in the field. So some of the things that have happened specifically, Kevin Shankweiler ran some summer studios focused on COVID concerns and protective equipment. John Sanford is currently running a studio to explore the use of technology to address isolation, which affects seniors and particularly those who are hospitalized and quarantined and their families, and sort of address the issue that no one should have to die alone, and how do we deal with issues like that. I also polled faculty about what's happening and what they think about what's going on. Dr. Choi suggested that it seemed like she had a sense that the pandemic would potentially result in a cutback in work, but that doesn't seem to be happening. And we've seen a lot of students with internships and work continuing pretty much as before in the design field overall. But then the downstream, it's bound to change the way things are going on, the way things are happening, and particularly with regards to the kinds of things we're seeing in research and the effect it's having in research. And Dr. Aflatooni also has commented that COVID really affects the way we conduct human-centric participation and how we conduct our research. So in-person research is pretty much off the board. So we've been looking at ways to deal with that and reshaping how we deal with that. Also, the sort of issue of how we engage the community and things that are going on has been really affected by the way the pandemic has affected everyday activities. And sort of the need to really address community-driven and participatory design becomes increasingly important. So we think in the long run, there's going to be some shifts in how we conduct studies particularly, and how that might reshape some of the things that we're doing. So the other issue that I've tried to look at is externally what companies are thinking and what people and how people are reacting. So overall, there's sort of four major changes that we see happening. So particularly the rise of digital literacy is becoming increasingly important. Collaboration has gone up and become more important, although there's some stumbling blocks in terms of how we actually collaborate effectively. There are some tools, but they don't work terribly well in many cases. The level of expertise that's required is now being crowdsourced, which is an interesting innovation and really reshaping the way that we work. And then convergence across industries is accelerating, and we're seeing a lot of differences there. So one of the things that becomes apparent is that the global impacts substantially vary by industry. And I've sort of gathered some notes on issues related to healthcare, consumer products, smart products, digital design, which also includes sort of experience design, interaction design, the automotive field, fashion, packaging, and interior design. So some of the things that initially happened, so the World Design Organization reported on a number of initiatives at the beginning of the pandemic to sort of initiate competitions, to sort of share information and to generate new innovations and thoughts on how we can address this. And this really spun over, obviously, into healthcare. And there was a lot of development in healthcare in terms of applying design thinking to testing, tracing, and treatment, how to deal with mental issues that are arising, mental health issues, so living in isolation, how to better deal with protective equipment, a contactless everything, so how do we deal with non-touch surfaces, and then the use of data visualization and analysis. So a couple of the things that came up too of how is this affecting the work that's going on in the field. And this is particularly hitting hard at small companies and in terms of how they operate and their business models. So we've seen some cutbacks in those fields. The other thing that we're seeing with small companies they're being absorbed by larger companies who are acquiring design firms as sort of arm extensions to their in-house capabilities. And there have been a number of major acquisitions of important design consultancies over the past few years, past couple of years, and it's particularly accelerated now again with the pandemic. There's an interesting article sponsored by Smart Design, who started to question sort of what's accelerated and what haven't we seen coming. And they talk about the what's accelerated. So one of the things they talk about is adoption of mental health focused digital products. So we've seen some advertising running on products like HealthSpace and TalkSpace. What we didn't see coming, the decline of digital detoxing. So this is kids using digital technology. So obviously the pandemic has affected that, and the use of digital technologies has skyrocketed. And what's accelerated? Waste awareness. So we're much more aware of waste products. What we didn't see coming was disposable everything. So the need to sort of the fear to touch anything and surfaces became really problematic. We've seen some of the same things happen in some of the other fields. So in digital product design, so we've seen some new tools develop. So Slack, Zoom, and Dropbox are sort of used extensively. We've seen some new collaborative tools. Figma is one that's identified, and obviously we've been trying to work with Miro as well. So they're important tools, but still need to be modified and developed. We've seen some significant changes in the sort of areas related to facial design. So Accenture has identified the need for things like touch-free interactions, the use of biometrics and facial recognitions for entry and access to tools and devices, the deployment of smart thermal detection devices to check body temperature, mechanisms to minimize density and crowding, so issues related to signage and navigation, planned routes, strategies to increase throughput in retail organizations, keep the numbers of people in close proximity down, more advanced auto pay systems, again, to produce and to help promote throughput, the integration of virtual and physical healthcare systems, the integration of virtual and physical shopping systems, increased use of digital tools and simulation across the board in all industries. In the sort of some interesting developments that have happened in the automotive field. So we're beginning to see sort of disenfranchisement of manufacturing. So suppliers are having more impact, and there's more design input from suppliers in the automotive industry. There are a couple of other interesting things happening. So in terms of Hyundai, which has already been using antimicrobial paints and materials on their interiors prior to the pandemic, revealed that they're developing self-sterilizing materials to maintain clean antiviral and antibacterial cabins. But of course, and Ford recently rolled out software to update all of its police interceptor utility vehicles to provide a heating system that bakes the car to more than 133 degrees for 15 minutes, which lowers the viral concentration by greater than 99% on interior surfaces and materials. So those kinds of things are already happening in the field. The fashion industry has been severely hit by the pandemic. Supply chains were really cut back in Asia and India. So there were very few materials were very limited. Retail sales in the UK dropped by 20%. And so that industry has shifted dramatically and looked at design as one of the sort of ways of being able to deal with it. So we're starting to see things like virtual lookbooks, sort of with Lazy Susans that can sort of provide 360 gifts to be able to market products. And one of the things that we've seen is 50% of orders at the recent Paris Fashion Show were actually sold from virtual lookbooks direct to the marketplace. In packaging, we're seeing significant increases. So sustainability is becoming more important. Hygiene is a real driver for it. We're starting to see real-time tracking, embedded sensors in packaging to be able to maintain and monitor how things are being distributed. The look and feel of products is more important. Reduce preparation time, the ability to portion things out direct to the retail market, safety and hygiene in terms of tamper-proof materials. So there's a whole host of things that are happening there in the industrial design world, and it really bodes well for our students and job opportunities that are coming up, and a real opportunity to rethink things. And I think at that point, I'll just drop off and leave some time for Jason here.
All right, thank you. Next is Jason Freeman, Chair of the School of Music. Jason.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, everybody. I want to focus first on the fundamental challenges we have teaching music at Georgia Tech or at any educational institution right now with COVID-19. Here at Georgia Tech, we have 1,500 students every year who participate in our ensemble programs. These are from every major on campus. They play in about a dozen different musical ensembles ranging from marching band, orchestra, to choir, to rock ensembles. And these activities have suddenly become very dangerous to do in person. Singing is the most obvious example. There are multiple well-studied super spreader events related to choirs rehearsing, where a single asymptomatic infected individual spread COVID to pretty much every single individual in the room over the course of a choir rehearsal. There's also significant evidence out there to suggest that some woodwind and brass instruments magnify the effects of aerosol dispersion through the instruments themselves and out into the space. There's a lot of research underway in our community right now trying to figure out exactly what these risks are with different kinds of activities, different kinds of music, different kinds of locations, different kinds of instruments, and what mitigation strategies may be effective. Things like increased distancing, reduced practice duration, special PPE that has been modified for use with musical instruments, and alterations to HVAC systems. There is no conclusive evidence at this point. The largest studies that are underway right now don't expect to have their final recommendations and data until late fall or winter. And so what we're doing at this point is really taking a very cautious approach here at Georgia Tech, doing everything that we can do to use all of the mitigation strategies that are known and available to us. Just as some quick examples, at the moment, we're not having any rehearsals that involve woodwind or brass instruments or singers in any indoor locations. We have taken advantage of Georgia Tech's generosity in giving us a lot of additional outdoor spaces in which to hold those rehearsals. And even with them meeting outdoors, we have increased distancing much more than the standard 6 feet between these musicians. And they're using a large amount of protective equipment. Our singers are wearing masks. Our woodwind and brass players are wearing masks as well, which I know sounds strange. But these are masks that have been specially modified to have small slits in them where you can fit an instrument mouthpiece inside, but they still offer some protection. And we also have additional covers over instruments. Trumpets and trombones have bell covers to reduce droplet and aerosol dispersal through the instruments. Clarinets have these things called instrument socks that go around them. You can't even tell it's a clarinet anymore. The musician's hands are going inside, but there's this big kind of kind of case that goes around it to capture what might be coming out of keyholes as well. So those are some of the things that are in place with our marching band, for example, right now. That rehearses multiple times a week with reduced numbers outdoors. We're also trying to do our part to contribute to the research literature to better understand what aerosol emissions are with these kinds of musical activities. We're working with faculty member in chemical and biological engineering. Next week, we'll be placing some aerosol sensors in our practice rooms to see what is happening in the real world with individuals practicing with these instruments or singing over periods of time, how that interacts with the HVAC, and what findings we can use to try to find a pathway towards doing these more safely in the future. So that's one kind of wing of what we're doing here at the School of Music to make sure that our students and faculty and staff remain safe. The other part is investing in technology to be able to do these activities online. And that is a hard thing to do. So right now we're on Blue Jeans, and there is latency involved. So between when I say something here and when you all hear it, my audio signal is traveling to a central server. I don't know where that might be with Blue Jeans. And then it's going to each of you individually. And that time is usually about 150 milliseconds between me actually saying something and you all hearing it. which doesn't sound like a lot. I know sometimes on online conferences, there's awkward silences or people interrupting each other or those kinds of things that are a result of that additional latency. But it's not a big deal. With music, 150 milliseconds is an eternity. If you think about people trying to play in time, follow a conductor, keep to a beat, all that kind of stuff. Really, the maximum that we're able to tolerate from the research literature is around 15 milliseconds, not 150. And so 150 is kind of catastrophic to having any kind of real-time musical activity together. So we can try to reduce this, though, and we have done our best to reduce it. We are using special music collaboration technology. We're hosting the servers on campus at Georgia Tech. The signal doesn't have to travel across the network to Virginia or Ohio or someplace, but it remains on campus. We're using things that do everything they can to minimize that latency and also increase the audio quality. And in the best cases, we're able to get that latency down to that 15 or 20 milliseconds. So it's not quite as good as being in person, but it's kind of tolerable. That's the best case. It's not always like that. Sometimes it's 30 or 40 or 50 milliseconds, depending on a lot of different factors. But it's still a lot lower than we would get with traditional video conferencing tools. And our ensembles are able to do small group rehearsals together online using this technology. We're also hosting jam sessions and other things like that, just to continue the community that we have of music making school and help with all of our mental health by being able to make music together during this time. The other solution that we take is an asynchronous solution, which is not worrying about the latency at all, but trying to set up a way of working together that doesn't depend on that latency being low. And the model that I can liken here is that of a recording studio. So if you're a band recording in the studio, sure, you might all play at the same time, but often each musician might record their track separately. And they may be listening with a headset to hear everyone who's recorded before them and play along with those recordings as they're hearing it. And then the rest of the band is listening in, they're giving advice, they may do a few different takes, they may splice a few different takes together, they may spend a lot of time in the control booth talking about how to edit all this stuff together to come up with the final track that they're really happy with. And that is an experience that we can actually replicate pretty well online. And so we use cloud-based music production software. All the students and the instructor can be in a video call together on that platform. Each student is recording their part one by one, but everyone else is seeing that process unfold. They're giving feedback. And as each person is recording, they're hearing everything that's been recorded before them in the headset, and they're playing along with it. We find this approach is a lot more meaningful pedagogically. It's a lot more meaningful from a perspective of collaboration than the virtual choirs and other kinds of virtual ensembles that proliferated last spring, where each person was recording their own part in isolation, an audio engineer was putting the tracks together, and then no one was actually hearing the ensemble until the finished product was there. Here, we're involving everybody in the process. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing on the music performance side to try to maintain some pedagogically valuable and kind of experientially valuable experiences for our students within our music ensemble program. More broadly, if we think about the profession, there's obviously been a cataclysmic change in the last 6 months. Live music has virtually ground to a halt. And that is an entire ecosystem that ranges from arena shows to symphony orchestra performances and chamber music to the corner bar or club where where a local band might be performing on a Saturday night. Most of that stuff is gone for the moment. And with it comes a huge part of the economy that drives the music industry. Everything from the ticket sales, refreshments and merchandising, to things like the AV equipment that's used to power these events and the people that run it and the companies that manufacture it and maintain it. There's been very limited success in moving these activities into an online format. Lots of online stuff is happening, and that's great, but there's two fundamental challenges with it. One is that all of a sudden local musicians are competing on a global audience. I can go online and listen to the Atlanta Symphony, but I can also go online and listen to the Berlin Philharmonic in the same way. And so that makes it very hard for people to break in on a local scene and begin to build their careers in that way. The second thing is it's very hard to monetize these online performances because people are used to not paying for these kinds of things online. In fact, in many ways, what we're facing right now is, I think, the biggest shift in the music industry since Napster came along and started this idea that music on the internet should be free about 20 years ago. And I don't see this as a temporary thing. I think that this has gone on long enough already and is going to continue for quite some time to come, that this is really going to permanently alter people's habits. It's not that live music won't come back, but it's going to come back in a different way. And it's come back where online musical experiences are going to be complementary to the experiences that we have in person. And that's where I think that the other part of the School of Music really comes in here, is that, we specialize in training our bachelor's, master's, and doctoral students in the technical, the musical, the design skills that they need to create the next generation of music products and services and really transform the industry. The skills that we've been teaching them all along are just as relevant to solving these new problems that we have. But the problems have shifted, and what we're looking at now is how in our teaching, how in our research, we can really bring all of our knowledge and our skills and our students' skills and leadership to bear on offering the solutions that are going to help this this growing importance of live collaborative musical events online and of live connections in how we rehearse music as well be effective in how they unfold online and also be economically viable.
Thank you, Jason. So we're not really going to have time for questions. Let me say that it's obvious that this pandemic has affected everything from products to buildings to cities to artistic expression to music, has economic impacts, has impacts on the way that we teach. Many people ask me, how do you do studio teaching virtually? Well, we're trying to figure that out and invent that. We're also dealing with now, are we going to return to in-person teaching in January? And frankly, I don't know. I'm not quite sure we're going to be back to normal, even at that, what seems like a long time off, but for curricular planning is just around the corner. So this has been an interesting take. It appears that they're both short-term and long-term impacts. And let me just say, the schools and the College of Design are at the cutting edge, trying to address these issues, trying to understand them, and trying to adapt to this unique environment. So with that, let me close it out. Say thank you to each of our chairs for their insightful comments. Give them a round of applause, if you will. There's a little bit of latency to that, I'm afraid. But thank you all, and take care, stay safe, and let's, as Gil Weinberg says, figure out how to make lemonade out of these lemons. Thanks. Bye.